Darren, both our teams took it on the chin this week, didn't they?
Yeah, we've had a good roll, but this week was not the best in the world.
In the words of Anchorman, that escalated quickly.
Yes,
is it quickly or fast? Or
I think it's quickly. That escalated quickly. Okay. Yeah, I think so. Somebody tell us in the comments. We'd love to get an Anchorman conversation going in the comments. That would not hurt our feelings.
The way that we'll talk a little bit more about this, the way that the second half of the LSU A&M game hit me was very similar to an experience I recently had at my urologist office.
I'm very afraid of that. Go ahead.
It's not what you think, Darren. So I go every year to get my PSA exam. My father had prostate cancer, and he's doing great after that, cancer free. Awesome. It's one of the most treatable cancers there is out there. So the guys that are watching, go talk to your doctor, especially if you're at age 50. You might need to go at age 40. It's not as bad as people say. It's important to do that. Get ahead of this because you want to find it quickly if it's there.
Absolutely.
So my urologist retired, and I had to find a new one. So I found one that was actually closer to my house. And so I went to my first appointment there, and it was on the upper level of this building. And I got up there, and then they took me to the exam room, and there were all windows. And I'm a window guy. I love windows. I was standing next to the window thinking, wow, what a great view. I've never had this view of my town before. This is wonderful. Well, I wanted to get a better view, so I walked closer, and I was trying to look to my right even further, and next thing you know, I did a face plant right into the glass.
Nice.
I think that's what happened to LSU against A&M on Saturday night.
Yeah, and the piece of glass was that they face planted into was the I'm blank on his name, but the quarterback,
a read option quarterback.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The quarterback from NBA in Nashville. That's exactly right.
Not like they faced one of those the week before, but I digress. Let's go ahead and put on the brakes. Darren, let's talk about our takeaways from this weekend. Why don't you start off?
Well, I'm going to start off by talking about a read option quarterback. How's that? Let's talk about Bobby Petrino, Taylon Green, and that Arkansas offense, because my goodness gracious, have they been something to behold. Now, obviously, they have not had a perfect season, but what they have done is shown beyond a level of improvement to a level of wow improvement. Like I said, it hasn't come through in every single game, but I think you could say it was a level of wow improvement. And the reason I'm not just talking about Bobby Petrino is because no matter how incredible the schemes of Bobby Petrino are, I don't think it happens on the same level if he had not been able to, in our transfer portal era that we live in, handpick the quarterback that he wanted to come and be a part of the system. I think that makes all the difference in the world. So when you look at Arkansas's offense year over year, listen to this number: 160 more yards per game average year over year, 160 yards more per game. Taylon Green is at 2,056 yards passing with 17 touchdowns or 11 touchdowns. His one big thing that I think has been the thing that's kind of held Arkansas back a little bit at times is ball control. he likes to throw it to the other team more than he should. That's something he's definitely got to work on, because 11 TDs are fantastic. However, 7 interceptions not so much. So just in the being real in the evaluation, I think that has to be pointed out. But then you also have on the other side of that, going back to that whole read option and what rushing a rushing quarterback brings to the table, 395 yards and 5 touchdowns with his legs. When you look at this, the complementary pair of Bobby Petrino and Taylor Green, there is no doubt when you look at 2,000 yards passing, over 300 yards rushing, that Taylor Green brings a lot to the table. And he has allowed this Bobby Petrino offense to flourish and expand to the point that, I mean, we're looking at a Sam Pittman team that has 5 wins. It's looking at bowl eligibility, and anybody that's a fan of Sam Pittman, you got to love that. And of course, Arkansas loves that. It's after the way last year went. However, I think you also have to look at that from the other side and say, yes, Taylor Green brings incredible athleticism to the table, but that athleticism uh, is has an even greater impact when it's inside of a Bobby Petrino system. Because yes, the yardage, both running and passing, is impressive. But when you look at the per attempt on both of those, he is with his arm averaging 8.3 yards per attempt, and with his legs averaging 4.2 yards per attempt. That is athleticism working within a scheme. When you are at that level per attempt, both with your arm and with your legs. So I'm super pumped about what Sam Pittman's year has looked like, especially compared to last year. I'm super pumped that it looks like Sam Pittman is going to go beyond this year and survive this year. Bobby Petrino, hate him, love him, leave him, whatever. You cannot deny the impact he's had on both Arkansas this year and ultimately Sam Pittman's career. Good for Bobby Petrino, good for Sam Pittman, and awesome for Taylor Green that he's found an offense to flourish within.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Darren. It's the what's making it work is Petrino and Taylor Green, the two of them
Exactly.
together,
Exactly.
and we're seeing success from Arkansas that I think is going to continue. So
Yep.
great points.
What's your first takeaway?
Well, speaking of new coaches in new places, I want to talk a little bit about the Mike Elko effect. Yesterday, I talked to several A&M fans. Uh, we all go to church together, and we have to get along. And so, and talking to one of them, and we've talked in the past about the Jimbo Fisher error. It was just a painful time. The scary thing for A&M has always been they have the resources.
Mhm.
They just made bad hires.
Absolutely.
I told one of these Aggie fans yesterday, I've never really been scared of A&M before, but now, y'all got a good coach now. Mike Elko is a good coach, and it showed in this game. It's a hypothetical, I realize that. I don't know, though, if Jimbo would have made the quarterback change like Elko did. But what a gutsy move on his part. You've got a good quarterback in Wegman. He showed up big in the Missouri game. He was struggling against LSU. Blake Baker had the Tigers just pouncing on him all game long. He's not a big scrambler. He's a pocket passer, so that worked to LSU's speed advantage. Elko, instead of continuing to kick against the goad, so to speak, said, "We're going to make a change." And you saw it on the sidelines when he told Wegman, and in comes freshman Marcel Reed, who we have talked before about on the show about before on this show. And we've talked about his immense talent and his upside when he was playing when Wegman was out with a shoulder injury. He comes in, and the statistics on paper don't look that impressive. Passing, he was 2 for 2 for 70 yards, running 9 times for 62 yards. And here's a truly impressive statistic: 3 touchdowns. He ran the zone option and made LSU look silly on defense. It didn't seem like LSU ever adapted to Reed being in there as quarterback. Now, you can say we didn't prepare for that adequately. We didn't think he was going to play the game. And I think Brian Kelly even alluded to that on the Feinbaum show earlier today. But the Marcel Reed effect changed the entire game. And it never would have happened if Mike Elko had not made the call. We're gonna take a gamble here. We're gonna roll the dice, but we've got to do something different to get back in this game. He was not afraid to make that call. He was not afraid to swallow his pride and say, "Look, let's give this a shot." In addition, let's talk a little bit about the A&M ground attack. 245 yards rushing. Daniels rushed 12 times for 91 yards. That's a 7.6 average per carry. Moss rushed for 14 times for 83 yards, 5.9 average carry, and 2 touchdowns. Do you realize A&M only had a total of 134 passing yards? They controlled the line of scrimmage. When
Mhm.
Marcel Reed came in, totally changed the game. So kudos to Mike Elko. Kudos to A&M for hiring Mike Elko, bringing him back and stepping back from the Mark Stoops hire when it looked like it was all in the bag. It was all a done deal.
Yep.
Next thing you know, here comes Elko. Well, what? They struck gold with this guy.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And you see, I think one of the incredible things about his personality and what you see and what you pointed out is I don't think it's just a Jimbo thing. I think there are a lot of coaches that after making the stance, this guy's our starter, would not have made that change, period, just because they weren't going to do it. No other reason. So I think it's very impressive that in the moment, what's best for the team is what he will do. And you're right. That makes Texas A&M scary. That's a great point.
Now, I'd like to go ahead and shift the order here and make my second one. Can I go ahead and do
Okay,
that? Because
absolutely.
it flows from the first one. It's the same game, and that is the rushing problem at LSU.
Yeah,
And
been a
you're in
bit of
the
an issue.
SEC. We've talked about this before, Darren. Run the ball. Well,
Yep.
they ran the ball for 24 yards.
Oof.
Credit A&M's defense. They had something to do with that. But LSU's run attack, their rushing attack, has not been good all season. Going through the games, they had 117 yards in the opener against USC, only 68 yards against Nicholls State, 132 yards against South Carolina, 102 against UCLA. Their big game was South Alabama, 237 yards. Only 84 rushing yards against Ole Miss, 158 against Arkansas. Looked like they had turned the corner finally against a good defense. They ran the ball, and then they dropped the dud against A&M, 24 total yards. Do you realize LSU, I believe, is ranked 15th now in the SEC in rushing? They are at the bottom, right above the last place. With that offensive line that's so good at pass blocking, there is a disconnect when it comes to run blocking. I don't know if it's scheme. I don't know if it's the way they're practicing, what's going on. But at some point, as good as LSU's passing attack is, you've got to run the ball. You saw what happened when Nussmeier was put in a position where he felt like he was having to carry everything. He was forcing throws through 3 interceptions. Uh, it was just it was an ugly night because I think it started they could not establish a ground game at all. On top of that, the miscues they made, 2 missed field goals, 1 botched field goal snap. Uh, they scored a total of 6 points in the second half. A&M scored 14 in the third quarter and 17 in the fourth quarter. So I think LSU's got some serious offensive issues. I don't think it's all Nussmeier's fault. They've got to figure out a way to create some semblance of a balanced offensive attack.
Mhm.
You've heard we've talked about before the ground game opens up the passing game. Now,
Right.
in LSU's case, right now their strength's passing, so they may come out and pass on first down, but you've got to sprinkle in some runs there. or we're going to see more of what happened in
Yeah.
the second half as Nussmeier is slinging the ball, trying to make something happen.
A lot of times, and it won't be during the season, it'll be after the fact. A lot of times, one of the things that comes out when you see a drop off in either aspect of the game, whether it be pass block or run block, is there has been not necessarily an offensive scheme change, but maybe an offensive line coach scheme change where he decided to adapt this method of blocking for, I can think of at least two. I feel like there's a third, but I can't come up with it. That just in the last 3 or 4 years, I know that was a conversation a couple of years ago with the Kentucky offensive line when there was an offensive coordinator change, an offensive line coach change. A new system of run blocking was brought in, and they were actually, I think it was a new system of pass blocking was running, and they were all of a sudden absolutely awful. Same thing happened with Vanderbilt. A new run blocking system came in with a new offensive line coach and an offensive line that had been the anchor of the team looked like they had forgotten how to block. It was just like, what is happening? And I think it's very, very similar to what's going on with LSU. So again, that stuff never comes out during the season. But at the end of the season, it wouldn't surprise me if there was some kind of little small change that they made, hopefully identify and fix as we get through the progression of the season. But that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, yeah. How about your second takeaway?
I'm going to continue on the offensive conversation as well, and talk about offenses. No. All right. So, there was a lot of conversation going into this year about offensive coordinator changes. Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Oklahoma, even Mississippi State. But we're not even going to get into their numbers. That's such an outlier this year. They have so much, they were trying to build the wise man built his house upon the rock. They were trying to build their house on the sand, and not because they were foolish, but just because that's the cards they were dealt. So there was just nothing they could do about it. So I'm not even going to dig into their numbers. But when you look at the coordinator changes that have been made, we've talked a lot about defense being supreme in this league. In this league, don't even know what word that was. Defense being supreme in this league. Uh, and that's an accurate statement, but offense can change everything. It really is amazing how much of a linchpin an offensive coordinator change can be to the good or the bad. Prime example is Arkansas this year. The number I already have thrown out 160 more yards per game. Not only 160 more yards per game, but over 7 points. They are a touchdown better per game change in offensive coordinator. And it was a change the previous year that Sam Pittman made that didn't work out. And so you got a change that leads to another change. Obviously, this one is working a whole lot better. The same can be said for Vanderbilt. Their numbers are not as obvious from a yardage perspective, but so obvious from a points perspective. They're only averaging this year about 40 yards more per game, which is not this huge number, but they're 10 points better per game. That is a big number to be 2 scores better game over the previous year. Kentucky, again, Mark Stoops has not had the best of times with offensive coordinator changes. This is his third year, third coordinator. And last year, there was a little bit of a bump. They went up about 15 yards a game, about 4 points a game. But this year, it is just absolutely bottomed out. They are just barely over 300 yards a game and aren't even averaging 20 points a game. They're at 19.1 points per game. So, offensive coordinator changes everything. Even with Oklahoma, you got to look 2023, 507 yards per game. 2024, I don't even want to say this number out loud, 293.3 yards per game. You talking about dramatic. And just because we've talked about it, just to throw the numbers out there, South Carolina, their offensive progression under their old coordinator has been not a progression, but a regression. They are getting worse offensively every single year. I think Beamer ball has something to do with that. Their special teams can make up for the 3 to 5 points they're regressing each year over the last 3 years from an offensive perspective. But still, they have from 2022 to 2024, their offense is now 30 yards and 6 points worse per game. And I think, unfortunately, you're going to see that continue with a Dow Loggins offense. They will continue to drop off. But think about, even for South Carolina, as strong as their defense, as strong as their special teams is, if they had a Bobby Petrino level offense, what would their record be over the last 3 years? I mean, so defense is king, but offense can change everything. it can really, really, really make a difference and put your defense in a position to win you the championships that we talk about defense doing. The two are very much have to be complementary in our league the way it stands today.
Yeah, I agree. Well said, Darren. How about your? You want to go ahead and do your third?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Since I don't mean to pick on anybody, I may have referenced Kentucky a couple of times. You know, our good friend, the head ball coach, Steve Spurrier, when he left Florida back in, I believe, was that 2001? Does that sound right? I'm not, yes, 2001. He said 12 years at any one school is long enough. And he retired from the University of Florida and went on to coach Washington. A little bit of a side note, in one of the ESPN articles that I read about Spurrier's decision to retire, the phrase was actually used, he turned his back on a $2.1 million annual salary to walk away from his alma mater. So to me, turned his back on implies that the writer of the article was talking about how enormous of a salary that was. Think about that. Steve Spurrier in 2001 was making 2.1, and Coach Stoops, that we're about to talk about a little bit, is making $9 million a year. And 2.1 in 2001 was a crazy amount of money that people couldn't believe someone would turn their back on. So just wanted to throw that in there. All right, now Mark Stoops has been at Kentucky for 12 years, and with things where they are now, 3-5, their final 4 games are at Tennessee, Murray State at home, at Texas, Louisville at home. That does not seem like a bowl game is in the cards for Kentucky, because you would hope they're going to beat Murray State. All of Bluegrass Nation hopes that they beat Louisville, and which Mark Stoops has done well with that. But you've got to pull off an upset at Tennessee or at Texas just to become bowl eligible. So that doesn't sound very positive. So I guess what I want to throw out, I threw out earlier in the season, Kentucky fans, what are you going to do with Mark Stoops? Because we could already kind of see where this season was headed. Now I want to throw out a warning to Kentucky fans. Yes, 12 years may be long enough anywhere, but also be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. Because here's the thing, let's be honest. Signetti at Indiana, that's now 8-0, it's only his first year. He's not leaving Indiana this year. Just saying, just throwing that out there is something to consider. After year 2, if he's successful again, maybe. So just throwing that out there. First-year coaches at the University of Kentucky, no matter how well or poorly their predecessor did, have only averaged 3 wins a year. Second-year coaches have only averaged 5 wins. So, Mark Stoops, even though this year probably will end up a 5-year win or a 5-win year, Mark Stoops is still right at, over the last 5 years, right at about 7 wins a year. Take a step back. He's shown he'll be willing to make changes. Do you give it another year before you start calling for his head? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just saying, even if this year is a 5-year win, if you start out with a new coach, historically, you're probably not going to have that same level next year. So don't just be all willy nilly. Be careful what you wish for. Take a good survey of the coaching market as it exists today before you just go all nuts. Maybe a 13th year's not the end of the world. Don't know the answer to that, but just throwing it out. Consider everything before you start screaming for Mark Stoops and putting for sale signs in his front yard. Just throwing it out there.
It's a kind way to put it, Darren.
We just wanted to consider everything. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Stoops may be pressured to make a change at offensive coordinator in order to keep his job.
Oh, I think he has to. I think that's the only way. That'll be. I think it was last week we talked about that's the sacrificial lamb. If he wants to stay in Kentucky, that's what has to happen. I agree completely with that.
Speaking of coordinators who are tied to coaches' fates, I want to go for my third takeaway to Starkville and talk about the Mississippi State defense led by first-year defensive coordinator Coleman Hutzler. This is his first DC job ever, and it's not going well. I went to a couple of sites, message boards of Mississippi State football fans, and they are irate with Hutzler. They're realistic in the standpoint they knew the defense was not going to be good, but to be this bad.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how bad the Mississippi State defense is. That they're at the bottom of the SEC. There's only one game so far this year out of the first 8 games they played where they held an opponent under 10 points, and that was Eastern Kentucky in the first game, held them to 7 points. In the second game, Arizona State, they gave up 30 points. They gave up 41 to Toledo. They gave up 45 to Florida. They gave up 35 to Texas. They gave up 41 to Georgia. They gave up 34 to A&M. And probably the most painful one is the 58 points they gave up to Arkansas. I picked them to win that game. I thought that was going to be an upset. I never dreamed the defense would play so poorly. It's not getting any better at Mississippi State. This defense is not responding. You can argue, well, we have injuries or we don't have the players yet in the positions that we want them to be in. But at some point, Jeff Lebby is going to have to take a look. And even today, he came out defending his defensive coordinator, which you expect the coach to do. But I'm not sure Hutzler is the answer in the long term for Mississippi State. It's one thing to be bad. It's one thing to be atrociously awful. And right now, the Mississippi defense is setting the bar extremely low. I wonder if something needs to be changed. They're giving up over 36 points a game, average 36 points a game. Look, you can say, oh, we got a tough schedule. Yeah, but you want to see some improvement in your defense. You want to see that they're taking steps. One of the things that LSU defense is not near the top in the SEC. But we can look at that defense and say they've made improvements. Saturday night against A&M in the second half reminded us they still have a ways to go to be an elite defense. We're not seeing any improvement in the Mississippi State defense, none at all. At some point, the coach has to step back. Lebby has to say, did I make the right hire at defensive coordinator? You're paying this guy, he's your highest paid assistant, $1 million a year. You're not getting the results and you're not getting seeing any signs that there is improvement coming. I think Mississippi State has a huge problem on defense. Lebby is going to be forced to address this at some point, or this could be his downfall.
And I may not be correct, but I'm almost positive. And Mississippi State fans, Sven, let us know in the comments if I'm incorrect. I believe this coordinator brought the change to the 4-2-5 defense that they had not run before. And I think your point is perfectly made. Obviously, they made a complete scheme overhaul, didn't have the people, and didn't make the right adjustments. I mean, you can't just come in and say, "Here's what we're going to do." I mean, switching to that kind of defense is like having a wide open defense or a wide open offense and bringing in an offensive coordinator that runs a wing T or the triple option. It's not going to go well. You're going to look like nobody knows what they're doing, and I think that's what we're seeing on the defensive side of the ball from Mississippi State. So it hasn't been a proper adjustment, and that's on the DC and on the head coach. I think it's great points.
Look, we saw this at LSU. Brian Kelly made a mistake in hiring Matt House.
Yep.
It did not work at all for that defense. Watching Jaden Daniels throw that Hail Mary the other day to beat the Bears,
Mm-hmm.
I looked at my wife and I said, I don't know if I can ever forgive Brian Kelly for not winning a national title with Jaden Daniels and the offensive firepower we had last year. It was because the defense was so stinking awful. Finally, Brian Kelly realized I made a mistake. I've got to make a change. That may be where Jeff Levy ends up sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you think you're having a bad day, you could be the defensive back for Chicago that was taunting the fans right before he got burnt on a Hail Mary. You could be having a worse day. I can't remember his name, but whew, that's
awful,
rough.
Awful.
That is RUFF rough. That's nasty.
Awful. Darren, as we look back on this past weekend and who we give the brown bag and we share a post-game quote of the week. So Darren, who is your brown bag for this past weekend?
Ben, we're friends, correct? And there's nothing I can say to end our friendship. Is that correct?
I can't go that far, Darren.
All right. Well, I don't want to be ugly and just take out a whole team. So I'm going to give my brown bag to the LSU special teams. The things that happened in that game just can't happen. I don't want to kick somebody when they're down, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it, but it just can't happen. So I'm gonna give my brown bag to LSU special teams. Sorry. How about you?
No offense taken. I was debating my brown bag between the LSU special teams or the LSU run game. Since you brought up the special teams, I'll go ahead and agree with you. 2 missed field goals, that horrible botched attempt.
That's happened twice.
Exactly. Oof. Those things should not be happening at all. So I agree with you on the brown bag pick. What do you find in terms of a post-game quote of the week for us, Darren?
I made the comment a couple of weeks back and said that sometimes coaches can be boring because they get caught up in their coach speak. This week, we had enough coaches prove that wrong that I wanted to share a little bit from each of them. Now, it's just kind of one answered question from each. We've got four coaches, Coach Pittman, Coach Elko, our good friend Eli Drinkwitz, and I just absolutely went blank. Lane Kiffin, there we go. I knew it would come to me. I knew it would happen. So, and Lane Kiffin, all 4 of them had some really interesting moments where they answered a question that they may or may not have liked from a reporter, but they definitely blew through the idea of coaches being boring.
Say I'm 0 for 7 on 3rd down, but you win by 33. Yeah. Can you explain? Is there any explanation for that?
I think the other plays were really good. I think, 1st down and 2nd down, if we scored whatever we scored, the other ones must have been exceptional,
Quick, what do you think it is about what you guys do that's able to lead to such effective results immediately?
Yeah, I think it's the way we talk to the young people. I think the things that we talk about, the messaging, how we bring really good people into the building. We talk about doing things together. We talk about culture, and everyone talks about it, but then we go out and we live it every day. And I think we back up our actions. We're very honest. We're very open. And this is a real program. It's not fake. It's not a politician running this program, talking fast and BSing everybody. This is a real program. And for all the recruits out there, this is a real place. And if you want to be really good at football, this is a really good place to be.
No, I didn't see any similarities. I saw 3 turnovers. I saw a bunch of guys beat the crap that went out there and fought their butt off. There wasn't anything similar to the Texas A&M at all. It was 13-0 at halftime because of an interception. We fought our butt off, and any other conversation outside of that's ridiculous.
Bowl eligible isn't the goal of the season, but that's now ticked off. Just how good does it feel to have that ticked off and the rest of the season still in front of you guys?
Yeah, I didn't really know we were, so we don't really think that way. I guess we are.
Any more questions up top?
But I like that. You're actually the only person in this town or fan that actually would probably say that, because everybody else, we don't win a national championship. I mean, what a bad year. So appreciate that.
So those 4 guys definitely were not boring in their answers. I think a little bit of the Dark Lord came out in our buddy Drink. What do you think? I don't think he liked that question at all.
Well, Drink is not having the year that he had last year, and Missouri's not showing up in the big games. But what about Kiffin? Do you think Kiffin has been a little bit surly ever since the overtime loss to LSU?
I think it's very interesting that he spent all of the offseason talking about get us the money, give us the expectations, we'll meet them. And now it's like, well, there's so much expectation. Well, yeah, I mean, there's the expectation that you were saying, bring it on. We got it. Well, it's here. And now you're saying, well, if I don't have a national championship, yeah, that's a little much. And I think you're right about the timeline of that.
That's good stuff, Darren.
Yep.
Now, as we look ahead to the upcoming weekend, we want to give our sure thing pick and our upset pick. Darren, who is your sure thing pick for this weekend?
I cannot believe I'm about to do this again. And Vanderbilt fans, earmuffs, I'm so sorry. My sure thing pick is Tennessee. I think they're coming off a bye week, which, I'm just having one of those nights where Heupel, there we go, is a fan of, an undefeated fan of, coming off of a bye week. And that is not going to go well for where Kentucky is sitting. So Vanderbilt or Tennessee is an absolute sure thing this week. How about you? Who's your sure thing pick?
I think Ole Miss over Arkansas. The way that Kiffin is downplaying things, he's almost channeling his Lou Holtz, like, whoa, are we, the expectations are so high, we can't meet them. And I think he's trying to fly under the radar. The reality is Ole Miss has a very real chance to sneak back into the playoffs.
Absolutely.
If they win out, they can make a very strong case. And it starts with a big win over Arkansas. So I've got Ole Miss as my sure thing pick. How about your upset pick?
Well, I said last week that I was going to go with it until they prove me different. But even though the Texas game didn't turn out to be a win, it still was only a 3-point loss, which I'm not at all a fan of moral victories. So that is not my point. But I will say the 3-point loss shows an improved floor because you've played 3 top 10 teams this season, beat one of them, and lost to the other 2 by a field goal. So that being said, they are a 6.5-point dog in Auburn. Diego Pavia is undefeated in Auburn. I'm going with Vanderbilt as my upset pick. How about you?
I'm looking at this Massachusetts, Mississippi State. No. I think this will help Bulldog fans. This is going to be a good win for them. I'm going to agree with you, Darren. I'm going to go with Vanderbilt, the legend of Diego Pavia. Hugh Freeze, I think it was today in a press conference, said he's sick of this guy. Well, nice. He's coming back to town one more time. And I like Vanderbilt's playing with a lot of confidence. Not many people have played Texas other than Georgia, which handled them pretty easily and reminded us that they're still the best team in the SEC.
Absolutely.
other than Georgia, Vanderbilt's probably played Texas the toughest. So I like where this Vanderbilt team is trending. I like what Clark Lee is doing. So I've got them with the upset.
And I, strictly from a Vanderbilt fan perspective, I need Hugh Freeze to run that mouth all week long. I need him to say something negative about Diego Pavia every time he's in front of a microphone, because that is exactly what is needed. Please, please, please do that, Hugh Freeze.
No. Thank you for watching. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button.
Mm-hmm.
Stay up to date with all the episodes that come out. Share the show with your friends. Tell them about the show. We'd love to have more people on board. We love the ones we have. Thank you so much for watching every week, for your comments, for your likes, for showing us, reminding us where we got things wrong. We appreciate all of that interaction because we love football just as much as you do. And this is great to talk about every week together. So
and I have a shout out real quick. Speaking of people following us and commenting, Jason Hart is a guy I went to camp with for years, huge Tennessee fan, randomly stumbled on one of our episodes where we talked about Tennessee and commented, "Cannot believe I stumbled across you on a YouTube video. Good to see you, even if my video." So shout out Jason Hart, big Tennessee fan. That was an awesome, awesome thing. We love all of our subscribers and all the commenters, but that was an awesome thing. Sorry, wanted to throw that in there.
It's a small world.
Absolutely.
World. So new episodes every Tuesday. We'll have a Thursday episode where we make our picks, so be looking for that. And until then, y'all take care.
Have a great week.
Thank you for making the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast your go-to sports show. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our show if you haven't already. Your feedback is so important. Let us know what you think about this week's show. Send an email to brewandshavers@gmail.com or a text to our text line 318-390-3599. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for listening to the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast. See you next week.